No, the scream tore out of my throat. Raw and desperate. But it was already too late. I stood frozen in the driveway. The smell of hot asphalt and burning charcoal filling my nose. Watching my father, Vernon, swing the shovel. It wasn't just any shovel. It was the one he'd been using to tend his precious grill. The metal tip still glowing a dull, angry red from the heat. He raised it high above his head. His face twisted into a mask of pure, unadulterated rage. And brought it down. Crunch. The sound of the windshield shattering was sickeningly loud in the humid afternoon air. Spiderwebs of white cracks exploded outward from the impact point. The glass groaning under the assault. My son, Orion, let out a strangled cry. Stumbling backward as if he'd been physically struck, he stared at the Jeep, the 1998 Wrangler we had spent 2 years sweating over. Bleeding over. Restoring piece by piece, now defiled in an instant. I looked at my sister. Roxy. She was standing on the porch. Arms crossed. A small, satisfied smirk playing on her lips. She didn't look horrified. She looked validated. Like this destruction was simply the natural consequence of someone telling her no. Vernon panted, heaving the shovel up for another swing. You think you can disrespect me in my own house? He roared. Spit flying from his lips. You think you can keep things from your family? He swung again. The metal connected with the hood this time, leaving a deep, ugly dent in the forest green paint we had applied just 3 weeks ago. The car wasn't just metal and glass. It was every overtime shift I'd worked. It was every weekend Orion had sacrificed. It was our freedom. And now, my father was beating it to death in front of the neighbors. This wasn't a family dispute. This was a war. And as the shovel raised for a third time, I knew one thing with absolute, terrifying clarity. I was done being the good daughter. Before I tell you exactly how my senile grandmother destroyed my father's life in return, drop a comment below. Where are you watching from? And what time is it for you right now? I want to see how far this story travels. To understand why I didn't cry when that shovel came down. Why I didn't beg or plead. You have to go back 3 hours. You have to see my hands. At 1 p.m. I was standing in my small, unair-conditioned workshop, scrubbing walnut varnish off my knuckles with a stiff bristled brush. The smell of sawdust and mineral spirits is something most people wrinkle their noses at. To me, it smells like independence. I'm a furniture restorer. I take things people have thrown away, broken chairs, scarred tables, dressers with missing drawers, and I make them valuable again. My parents call it playing in the trash. I call it paying the bills. Mom, you missed a spot, Orion said, pointing to a streak of dark stain on my elbow. He was standing next to the Jeep, holding a microfiber cloth like it was a surgical instrument. He had already wiped down the fender 3 times. That Jeep, a 1998 Wrangler. When we bought it 2 years ago, it was a rusted skeleton. It didn't run. The floorboards were rotted through. It was a piece of junk. But for 2 years, every spare dollar I earned went into parts. Every Sunday afternoon, Orion and I were under that hood. I taught him how to bleed brakes. He taught me how to be patient with a stripped bolt. That car wasn't just a vehicle. It was $14,000 of hard-earned cash and 1,000 hours of mother-son bonding. It was the physical proof that we could build something beautiful with nothing but our own 2 hands. It looks good, kid, I said, drying my hands on a rag. Really good. We loaded the back with the food. I'd spent $200, a significant chunk of my weekly earnings, on premium brisket and ribs for the party. It was a potluck, which in my family meant Sable brings the expensive meat, and everyone else brings a bag of chips. I knew the dynamic. I accepted it. Or at least, I thought I did. We drove to my parents' house in silence. The warm wind whipping through the open windows of the Jeep. Orion was grinning, tapping the steering wheel, imagining the day he'd get his license next month. When we pulled into the driveway of the house I grew up in, the contrast was immediate. The Jeep gleamed, vibrant and cared for. The house behind it looked like it was dying of neglect. The grass was shin-high, yellowing in the Ohio heat. The paint on the siding was peeling in long, sunburnt strips. My father, Vernon, was sitting on the porch in a lawn chair that looked like it was about to collapse under his weight. a beer already in his hand. He didn't stand up when we got out. He didn't smile at his grandson. He just squinted at the Jeep. Then at me. I walked up the steps, carrying the heavy tray of marinated brisket. "Happy birthday to Orion," I said, trying to force a lightness I didn't feel into my voice. I brought the meat for the grill. Vernon didn't look at the food. He wrinkled his nose, leaning back as if I were contagious. "You smell like chemicals," he grunted. "Go stand downwind." "Sable, you're ruining the fresh air." I froze. I had scrubbed for 20 minutes. I was wearing my best summer dress. I knew I didn't smell. But then, the realization hit me. It wasn't a new thought. But today, it felt sharper. He didn't say it because it was true. He said it because he needed it to be true. It's the parasite's logic. My parents have taken money from me for years. They eat my food. They call me when the roof leaks. They need me. But deep down, they hate that they need me. It bruises their fragile egos to accept help from the daughter they labeled a failure. So, to balance the scales, they have to lower me. If they accept my brisket, they have to insult my smell. If they take my money, they have to mock my job. It's the only way they can swallow their own mediocrity without choking. They have to convince themselves that I am dirty, so they can feel clean. "I'll go put this in the kitchen," I said, my voice flat. "Do that," Vernon said, taking a long pull from his beer. "And try not to touch anything. Arlene just cleaned." I walked past him, the heavy tray digging into my fingers. I looked back at Orion. He was still standing by the Jeep, his smile faltering. Watching his grandfather ignore him. That was the moment the varnish cracked. I wasn't just bringing meat to a party. I was feeding the people who were starving my son of love. And I was getting tired of serving the meal. The party was in full swing by the time we walked back outside. But swing was a generous word. It was a suffocating tableau of suburban boredom. My mother, Arlene, had set up a folding table with a few bags of chips and store-bought potato salad that was already sweating in the sun. She sat next to Roxy, fanning herself with a paper plate, while Vernon held court with the neighbors, complaining about the price of gas. Orion and I sat on the edge of the patio, trying to make ourselves small. We were used to this, the feeling of being guests in a house that should have been home. "All right," Presents Arlene announced, clapping her hands like she was summoning servants. "Come on, Orion. Let's see what you get." Orion stood up, wiping his hands on his jeans. He walked over to his grandparents with that quiet dignity he'd developed far too young. Vernon handed him a white envelope. It was thin, flimsy. "Open it up, boy," Vernon said, grinning. Orion tore the seal. He looked inside. Then he looked deeper. Confused, he turned the envelope upside down and shook it. "Nothing fell out. It's empty," Orion said, his voice neutral. "That's the point," Vernon laughed, slapping his knee. "You're 16 now. You're a man. It's time you learned the value of hard work, not handouts. Consider that empty envelope your first lesson in the real world." Arlene tittered nervously. "Oh, Vernon, you're terrible." But he's right. "Sweetie, character is the best gift we can give you." I felt a hot flush of anger crawl up my neck. Character. As if they knew the meaning of the word. Then, almost as an afterthought, Arlene turned to Roxy. "Oh, honey, before I forget," she said, digging into her purse. She pulled out a crisp $50 bill and pressed it into Roxy's hand. "For your nails next week. I know you have that big audition." Orion didn't say a word. He just folded the empty envelope and put it in his pocket, nodding as if this was exactly what he had expected. And that broke my heart more than if he had cried. It was time. I stood up and walked over to my son. I pulled the Jeep keys from my pocket. They were heavy, substantial, attached to a leather fob I'd made myself. "Orion," I said, my voice cutting through the chatter. "I have something for you." I held out the keys. "It's finished. It's yours." Orion stared at the keys. Then he looked at the Jeep parked in the driveway. The realization hit him like a physical blow. His eyes widened. Filling with tears he refused to shed. "Mom," he whispered. Really? Happy birthday. He reached out, his fingers trembling, and took the keys. It was a perfect moment. A moment of pure, unadulterated joy. And then Roxy spoke. Wait. Seriously. She let out a sharp, incredulous laugh. You're giving him that junk heap, Sable. Come on. That thing is embarrassing. She walked over, eyeing the Jeep with disdain. But I saw the way her gaze lingered on the fresh paint, the new tires. I saw the calculation in her eyes. Actually, she said, her tone shifting instantly from mockery to entitlement. You know what, my BMW got repoed last week. It was a total misunderstanding. But whatever. I need wheels for my audition tomorrow. It's in the city. I can't take an Uber like a loser. She held out her hand to Orion. Give me the keys. Kid, you can't even legally drive alone yet. I'll do you a favor and keep the engine warm for you. I stepped between them. No. Don't be a brat. Sable. Roxy snapped. I need this. It's for my career. Orion doesn't need a car to go to high school. He can ride a bike. It builds character. Right, Dad? Vernon nodded, stepping up beside her. Your sister's right. Sable. She's got a real opportunity here. Don't be selfish. Orion can wait a few years. Let Roxy use the car for now. I looked at them. My father, with his beer belly and his arrogance. My sister, with her hand out, expecting the world to drop into her palm. My mother, looking away, refusing to make eye contact. And then I looked at Orion. He was gripping the keys so hard his knuckles were white. He wasn't looking at them. He was looking at me. He was waiting to see if I would do what I always did. If I would keep the peace. If I would sacrifice him to feed their egos. I realized then that my compliance hadn't been kindness. It had been cowardice. I had been paying a ransom for love that didn't exist. I had been teaching my son that he came second. The cost of being good was too high. I couldn't afford it anymore. I turned back to Vernon. No, I said. The word hung in the humid air. Heavier than the humidity. Sharper than the smell of charcoal. For a second. Nobody moved. The crickets seemed to stop chirping. The neighbors, who had been peering over the fence to see the new car, went silent. My father blinked, his face turning a shade of purple I hadn't seen since I was a teenager. He wasn't used to hearing that word. Not from me. Not from the daughter who had spent 36 years apologizing for taking up space. What did you say to me? Vernon asked, his voice low, vibrating with a dangerous tremor. I said no. I repeated, my voice steady, though my knees were shaking. This isn't a negotiation. Dad. It's not a family asset. It's Orion's car. I built it. I paid for it. And Roxy isn't touching it. Vernon let out a roar. It wasn't a word. It was a noise of pure, animalistic fury. He felt his authority slipping. The pedestal he'd built on my back starting to crumble. And he reacted the only way he knew how. With violence. This is my house, he screamed. Spit flying. You do what I say in my house. He lunged toward the grill. His hand closed around the handle of the charcoal shovel. The tip was still glowing. Radiating heat. Dad. Don't. I started. But he was already moving. He marched toward the Jeep. He didn't look like a father. He looked like a demolition crew. Wham. The first hit took out the driver's side mirror. Plastic shattered, scattering across the driveway like confetti. Vernon Arlene shrieked. But she didn't move to stop him. She just covered her mouth. Watching the show. You think you're smart, Vernon yelled, raising the shovel high over his head. You think you can come here and disrespect me? Crunch. The shovel came down on the windshield. The safety glass groaned and collapsed, spiderwebbing into a million diamonds. The sound went straight to my marrow. It was the sound of 2 years of late nights. Of saved pennies. Of my son's dreams being murdered. Orion let out a sound I will never forget. A small, broken whimper. Vernon pulled the shovel back for a third swing. He was aiming for the hood now. For the engine we had tuned by hand. If Roxy can't use it. He screamed. Nobody uses it. Something inside me snapped. The fear evaporated. Replaced by a cold, protective instinct that felt older than time. I didn't think. I moved. As he brought the shovel down, I lunged forward. I slammed my hands into his chest with every ounce of strength I had from years of hauling lumber. "Get away from him," I screamed. Vernon stumbled back. He wasn't expecting it. He tripped over his own feet and landed hard on his backside in the uncut grass. The shovel clattered to the driveway. Still smoking. The silence that followed was absolute. My father sat in the dirt, looking up at me with wide, shocked eyes. He looked small, pathetic. "You," he sputtered, his face twisting. "You put your hands on me, in my own yard." "I'm protecting my property," I said, breathless. "Don't you dare touch that car again. I'll have you arrested." Vernon scrambled to his feet, dusting off his pants, his arrogance rushing back in to cover his humiliation. "I'll call the cops. Assault, you assaulted your father." "Save your breath, Vernon." The voice cut through the yard like a knife. It was clear, strong, authoritative. We all turned. Grandma Etta was sitting up straight in her wheelchair. The blanket she usually kept over her lap was folded neatly aside. She wasn't looking at the birds. She wasn't nodding off. Her eyes, usually cloudy with age, were sharp as flint. She held up her phone. The camera lens was pointed directly at Vernon. I counted 3 hits. "Vernon," she said. Her voice didn't shake. "Mirror, windshield, hood. That shovel was red hot. That's premeditated. And given the value of that vehicle, that is a felony." Vernon's jaw dropped. "Mom, you saw that." "I see everything," Etta said. "I've seen you take Sable's money for 4 years. I've seen you treat Orion like a stray dog. And I just saw you destroy the only valuable thing on this property." She tapped the screen of her phone. She wasn't just recording. She was on a call. "Yes," Operator Etta said into the phone. Her eyes locked on her son. "I need police at 420 Elm Street immediately. I have a domestic disturbance. An intruder is destroying property with a weapon. Yes. I am in danger." Intruder Vernon laughed. A nervous, high-pitched sound. "Mom. Hang up. You can't call the cops on me. I live here. This is my house." Etta lowered the phone slowly. She smiled. But there was no warmth in it. It was the smile of a judge delivering a death sentence. "It hasn't been your house for a long time, son." Sirens arrived within minutes. 2 cruisers flashing red and blue as Vernon stood in the driveway, arms crossed, playing the outraged homeowner. He accused me of assault and demanded I be removed. The female officer ignored him and examined the Jeep instead, the shattered windshield, crushed hood, dangling mirror, and the shovel in the grass. I confirmed the Jeep was mine and handed over the registration. Vernon admitted damaging it, claiming it was his driveway and a family matter. The officer calmly informed him the damage amounted to felony vandalism. When I added that the vehicle was insured for $25,000, his face drained of color. Grandma Etta then provided video footage of Vernon smashing the Jeep while a child stood nearby. The officer watched briefly and ordered Vernon to turn around. He protested, but was arrested for felony vandalism and disorderly conduct. The handcuffs snapped shut, ending decades of his authority in a single sound. Etta requested an emergency protective order, which was granted. Vernon was barred from the property and driven away. I felt nothing but relief. The next morning, Vernon returned on bail, stopping just beyond the property line, waving an old deed. He screamed that he owned the house and threatened eviction. I walked down the driveway and opened a folder I had kept for years. I explained that he hadn't paid property taxes in 5 years. The county had auctioned the debt. I had bought every tax lien. When the redemption period expired 48 hours earlier, I filed for foreclosure. I held up the new deed, my name on it. He collapsed, whispering that I'd stolen his house. I told him I hadn't stolen it. I'd bought it. The law gave them 48 hours to leave. Roxy tried to spin the story online, but Orion posted the video of Vernon destroying the Jeep. The internet decided quickly. Her platform collapsed. 3 months later, the house was demolished. The sale paid for Grandma Etta's peaceful assisted living and a new life for my son and me, a workshop below, a home above. Now, the Jeep is restored. Orion is driving, and the air smells like cedar and coffee. They called me the help. They were right. The help kept everything running and eventually took the keys.